On 14th of April, I will be interviewing my friend, composer and conductor Jamie Mann, and I'm ready for her to join me. It's always at the beginning, there's some introduction. We met 2 years ago in November 2018 and have been in touch regularly. We are friends and we are going to concerts and share thoughts. And now I will invite her to join me on the screen. Hello, Jamie. It says that you are connecting. So just a second. It still says, yeah. Oh, great. Do you see me? Oh, well, it works. Yes, that's the most important thing. So greetings from St. Petersburg, everybody. And actually, I found the way to record it. So I will put it on YouTube channel. Do you have a good connection? Because you sometimes go like not the best connection.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can hear you okay.
Yeah, okay. Let's start. And thank you for being here. And by the way, I can switch the commands so that your face is not blocked by people joining. So I will switch off the commands. So yeah.
Okay.
So yes, we have only 55, 57 minutes because then Instagram will kind of block it. It will stop the recording. So if I disappear suddenly, I have warned you. So my first question is, like maybe you tell us about why you are composer, conductor, person who writes music, why you are not a writer, traveler, a photographer, any other artistic profession.
Wow. Well, I guess I love music. So that's why I started to write music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I ever really chose to be a composer or to be a conductor. And I think um, actually, in some senses, every person is many, many things at the same time. Everyone, I mean, someone who writes music is also someone who washes clothes, someone who cooks dinner, someone who does all the other normal things. So, in a sense, you're always um, a combination of many different things.
Are you saying by this that you can hear music in most routine processes of your life?
Um, well, I guess, well, it depends. I guess the question is, what is music then? If you listen, if you
Yeah.
listen to a sound, and you listen to it as music, then maybe that makes that sound music.
Because I had this idea to write a play which would be called Defining Mozart, where I would try to represent the connections between completely unconnected things, and they could all lead to music. I had this crazy idea, so I'm asking actually with an idea in mind, like, can we distinguish sort of artistic things and just kind of routine and mundane things, and I that's what I'm asking
Well, I
about.
think it depends what you mean by mundane. I mean, there are many writers now. One writer that I'm working with, for whom actually, when you look closer and closer to reality, so to the everyday things, the things we, I guess, might call mundane, that actually there's a lot of magic in those very mundane things.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there is something, there is a whole universe in it that we miss because we assume it's mundane.
Mm-hmm. And how
Um,
do you train yourself to see this beauty in usual things?
I
How do
don't,
you train
yeah, I don't
yourself?
think it's about training. I think everyone sees beauty in different things. And I guess if you talk about, for instance, creating a personal language or a personal universe, it's always about a collection of what you personally see as beautiful. And maybe that's what's so interesting about the artists that we love the most, is that they're very true to what they see as beautiful, and they're very capable and skilled at making that into a new piece of art.
Mm-hmm. And that resonates somehow to with us, yeah. So in a way, one could say that the artist is someone who can have things that are similar to as many people as possible. Like, for example, if I was special but nobody resonated with me, then I couldn't prove that I'm special to anybody. If you see what I mean, like you have to be special in the eyes of others, and others are resonating with you because they find similar things. So in a way that you are stopping being special and being, and the genius of big artists is actually in being close to as many people as possible. Right now.
Mm-hmm. I think there are many different questions and different topics in what you just said. I think a person can exist in spite of people knowing they exist, and you can also exist with other people knowing that you are there, or recognizing you as someone who is present. But either way, you still exist in the same capacity. It's just image your image exists in a different way. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, and when you talk about genius and all these kind of qualitative ways of describing someone, that's always not irrelevant, but it matters less and less when you start to think about maybe truth. If truth is something um, that exists whether we know about it or not, it's something that's true. It's true whether we believe it or not, whether we discovered it scientifically or whether we acknowledge it. But it's something that is true. Um, hmm. So if you imagine a person can carry multiple images of themselves. So you have an idea about who you are. You also have an idea about what you think other people see when they look at you.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, there is the actual thing that other people see when they look at you.
And also your performance of self, there's this book by Ernst Kaufman, The Performance of Self, that you perform yourself in many situations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So at any one time, there are multiple versions of you carrying on and existing and morphing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about the gap between who you actually are and who you think you are. That's the relationship that interests me the most.
Can you describe me? I actually rarely ask it, but can I ask you, is composition process painful in that way? Like, how much are you bridging some gap of um, anxiety or like a non-fulfillment, and you feel better after composition? Or on the contrary, you feel the light bursting out and you think, I'm sharing it with others? Is it a painful process or a process of, well, not self-enjoyment, but fulfillment and happily sharing it with others?
Composing music's really hard in the sense that it's a lot of work. I mean, like really, maybe even what you would call mundane work. It's, I think it's always a bit of a danger to romanticize the process of composing.
Mm-hmm.
because actually it's something that's really, for me, it's something that's very 9 to 5 actually. I really, if I'm going to enter a process where I can explore different things or try different things, I need a structure in which I can do it. And for me, the structure is really waking up at the same time, having breakfast at the same time, wearing the same clothes every day,
Mm-hmm.
working in a very, very, in terms of time, very, very rigid routine. And I found that's what really helps me when I'm composing, to then have freedom within my work to try different things and to be
Mm-hmm.
also emotionally available.
But that means that you've established sort of the routine is the same, but actually this self-restriction opens up new things that wouldn't have opened if you didn't follow that routine, right?
Yeah, well, I found that's how it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think also to simplify life, um, I feel that I sort of live three multiple lives. So I have public life, private life, and my secret life. And when I'm composing, usually it's also a way to enter to find what's existing in all those three lives and how I'm dealing with it. Um, but I find it more and more it's about exploring questions more than it is
I
about
actually
finding answers.
I actually thought you would say, and when I'm composing, I'm exploring my secret life. But you say that you're trying
Partly, yeah.
to combine them, the three of them.
Yeah, it's all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because ultimately or the type of music that I write doesn't exist actually until it's actually performed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's really the moment of birth for me.
But
Um,
but you know, I remember this quote from Pushkin, you know, the great Russian poet, that you can't at the same. Basically, he said that when I'm passionate, when I feel emotions, I'm just feeling them, and only when when I have calmed down, I am able to write. Is it true
mhm.
for compositions? Can you be in some truly life-changing process and emotion, and then inspired for compositions, or your real private life or public life events have to become more rationalized in your mind for you to be able to transpose them into compositions?
um, yeah. Well, when I tried to compose, usually the first 3 weeks are horrible because it's just procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I have a very good friend who is well, a sort of seasoned British composer, shall we say, who's very good at text messages. And usually in those 3 weeks, I'm texting him that, oh, everything is horrible. I can't compose. I can't concentrate. Everything is. And he always says the same thing to me. He always says, don't worry, be kind to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and allow yourself the time to not compose, to not be productive. Um, and the beginning of that process, because that beginning of that process is always really hard. And I guess maybe it's similar to the Pushkin idea that somehow out of this chaos you have to find a rhythm, you have to find something more regular before you can begin to make work. There's a long process of research and thinking, sort of um, sketching, I guess, before you can really get to the point of making. And the point of making is a whole other part of the process of composing.
Are you saying that you sort of have to have a distant view of what you're doing, sort of like to have a drone in your mind, go up, see the map of what you're supposed to create, and then go down and sort of investigate every little square that you have seen from above? Or is it more like moving inside the dark tunnel, only having a distant idea, a vague idea of what your final goal will be?
I think it's a bit of both, and it can be very up and down. In terms of mood, in terms of um, how productive you are, in terms of how much you're enjoying what you're doing. Um, yeah, the process is never completely fluid. It's always a little bit jaggedy, I think.
Do you hear just technical things? You know, I completely can't understand how a composer can listen to what is written. Like, do you hear what you are writing? Can you explain us how it is happening? Like, I'm hearing music only when I hear it on a device, you know?
Well, I guess it's for instance, like I guess it's like writing. You can't write a story with words that you don't already know.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's very similar with music. I mean, sometimes with electronics, you can discover new sounds that, and you're playing with a material, with a computer program, and it can open avenues to new sounds, to new possibilities. But in order to create a piece, like in the kind of traditional composing sense, um, you have to know the sounds that you're putting together and how they'll sound together at the same time, after each other.
So
Um,
you virtually have to hear the timbre of every instrument when you're writing an orchestral piece.
yes, well, at least you have to have an idea. But
Mm-hmm.
then the first time you hear an orchestral piece is always a little bit crazy because it's always a little bit different to what you imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Because suddenly it's live in the space,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always going to be a different, physically, it's a different experience to imagining something.
And you have this feeling of elation that almost similar to, I don't know, giving birth to a child, right? When you hear your creation.
Yeah, I mean, I've never given birth to a child.
I mean, neither.
But there is something, I think, about the process that maybe is similar to have something in your body and which is growing and changing, um, in a way that you're perhaps largely quite unconscious of as well. Um, and then suddenly it has a reality where it has to face an external world and you don't have any control over it anymore. Um, perhaps, yeah, perhaps in that way it's quite similar.
Hmm. What about your conducting? Is it a completely different life? You mentioned three lives. Is conducting life is your fourth life? Or your assistant conducting or your real conducting? How do you compartmentalize it?
Well, conducting is different to composing because it's a performative, um, way of making art. It's performance. It
Hmm.
involves other people. Um, with composing, you do a lot of things beforehand. Everything is preparation in a sense. Whereas with conducting, you're actually live performing. So in a sense, it does take a very different side of the brain, I think.
Hmm.
Um, conducting, I've always had a very, difficult relationship with conducting. I think I think it's something that can be really powerful, but at the same time can really, or from my experience, can really bring out the worst in you as a person as well.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know exactly why. I don't know exactly, if it's to do with the music, if it's to do with the industry, the situation in which you have to do it if you want to do it.
Or maybe
But
because everybody is looking at you and you kind of presume that you're more knowledgeable and better than others.
it definitely is something that involves a lot of thought about, your image in other people's eyes,
Hmm.
um, much more so than composing while you're in the process of composing.
But don't you feel also superior when you're just relaxing in the auditorium and people are struggling or like researching your piece? Doesn't it give you the same feeling of being, you know, on top of the world and kind of uh, also like the food for the ego in the same way as conducting does.
I think when you're listening to your own music, it's always a really complex activity. It's not that you hear your music, or for me, it's never that I hear my music and I think, God, I'm a genius. Um, Usually it's quite the opposite. Um, Usually it's that you hear it, but well, I find I'm constantly thinking, oh, could that bit have been better? Could that be different? How could you have made that better in a way? Did I make the right choice here? What? Because for every decision that you make, there are a million other choices that you could have made.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always a question of, yeah, seeing, you hear what's happened, but at the same time, you also live with all the other possibilities that you know
Mm-hmm.
um, could have been.
And you regret that they were not there, right? No?
Not necessarily. I mean, in the moment, you're also so full of adrenaline. It's
Mm-hmm.
everything is quite chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have to say, I've never actually regretted anything. Um,
Good.
I've been
Good.
pleasantly surprised. I've been very thankful,
Mm-hmm.
especially to musicians and to conductors who quite often make my music even better than I
Mm-hmm.
think it is, or I think it could be. But there's also, or the other aspect is the collaborative aspect with musicians. Quite often you can write something, or even in the composition process. I do work a lot with musicians as well, just through
Mm-hmm.
email or through recordings,
Mm-hmm.
for advice. Or if I'm writing for a singer, I very often have their voice in my head, or I speak to them regularly, or um, it's not always a lonely process.
You wanted yourself to talk about, well, I don't know why you chose a Messiaen, but let's start with the Magnus Lindberg and maybe your mentors, and maybe the figures that we like, maybe the viewers will also know. Like, I don't know, you actually have worked with many, well, you wouldn't like me describing them like this, but you have worked with people that are famous in the industry. For example, Peter Sellers, uh, Theodore Kurendis. Well, I saw it on your
Yes,
screen.
yes, yes, yes.
George George Benjamin, right?
Well, we're
No?
friends. I've
Yeah.
never studied with him, but we are good.
Pierre Laurent Aimard and Magnus Lindberg, the Finnish composer, whom maybe not know him. He was your mentor and helped you to develop your work. Uh, so, could you tell me, I don't know, how such figures who are kind to show their experience with you, how they affect you, and is it difficult not to remain too, not suppressed, but sort of subjugated to their experience and fame and age, and to remain yourself in the relationship?
Yeah, I think with all our relationships with other human beings, um, it's especially professional relationships, it's very important to establish for yourself your boundary, first of all, and also what it is that you want from that relationship. Um, in terms of mentors, I guess the reason why I usually don't like to talk about it is that actually mentorship, when you have someone who you really admire and you build a relationship with them, um, it is something that's very precious. But at the same time, it's something that, as the industry is right now, it can be used as marketing, or it can be used as a way to categorize people. And categorization is something that I really have an allergy to. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, if I was to be someone's protege or someone's yeah, or I mean, I don't think I even put Magnus on my website, but to tell people, if I was to introduce myself as someone who was mentored by Magnus, it's also finding a way to validate yourself through someone else. And I've always felt that it's very important to establish in the world who you want to be by what you make.
But people would argue that you are choosing a very difficult way here, because they would say, well, don't be so proud about it. Everybody has the name dropping in their activities when they're sort of up and coming. So they would kind of contradict you that it's normal, and if we are proud just like and try to establish ourselves without any connections, then it just wouldn't work. We would all remain in some relative darkness unknown to others. What would you reply to this?
I think everyone just has to make a decision for themselves. There is always the way that the mainstream works, the way that majority of people run their lives. And it's very important that if you don't feel comfortable with it, to be true to that feeling within yourself. It's also a way, I think, of finding people in the world, because there are millions of people in the world. It's also a way of finding other people who you genuinely have real connections with. If I was to put out, if I was to put myself out on, say, social media, in this kind of name dropping way, because I thought that it gives an impression of me that other people like, then other people become attracted to that image of me. But that image of me is so distant to who I actually am. So the question is, what is the meaning in that connection? Or what is the meaning when that person is interested in my work? When actually what they're interested in is so far from who I actually am. I mean, maybe it means that my career goes a bit slower than it could have done. I don't know.
There's this novella by Gogol called Portrait, where this dilemma is put for the character who receives the money, which could have been used for 3 years of training, or he kind of makes a pact with the devil and becomes famous, sort of on the next day, and then he, I think, either commits suicide or becomes mad. So of course, Gogol shows almost like Goethe, that this pact with Mephistopheles, kind of becoming famous very quickly, doesn't work in the long run. And I was wondering whether you also kind of have made an agreement with yourself, and maybe you think that if you do kind of become famous too quickly, then you will lose access to your inner talent. Are you afraid of losing this touch with yourself if you become too famous?
I think everyone makes art for different reasons. And for me, what I love about composing and why I need to do it, I think, it's the part of that process that allows me to spend time in research and to question and to think about life. In a way, it's you can gain a kind of distance from existence, from, let's say, social reality, and that distance allows you to think and find, I guess, what many people would call your center. And that is the part of the process that I really enjoy, I have to say, the most.
But
Um,
what are you driven by? Because when we are searching, it's already the questions are already put by us because you're not searching and going, for example, to explore the slaves in Africa, right? You're searching particular themes that interest you, and
yeah,
what are they?
well, they're probably the most simple things, actually. They are just, I think the one that drives me the most is probably love,
Hmm.
because I think it's a very basic need for people. Um, and love, if you imagine that sort of a branch in a tree, um, from it grows many, many different lines, um, themes, ideas, questions. Um, but central to everything is love and what it is and why we need it, why we don't have it, why we're so afraid of it, um, and why it's so joyous as well, of course.
I had this idea also for a play that actually love is the light that gives a meaning to the object that you become in love with, because without it, everything is just neutral. I don't think that the universe has love for anything, like, for example, even now, in a strange way, the virus shows that we could all be dead and the world wouldn't be less kind in a way, because it's just the neutral processes, all the volcanoes, I don't know, tornadoes, viruses, the snow would still be white, and I don't know, and the flowers will still be blooming, and we all could be dead, but the human love is kind of, it differentiates the object of love and makes it special and doesn't want it to die, and kind of creates the connection of your soul and this person, for instance.
Mm.
Well, that's my that's my idea. Well, you said that you wanted to talk about narcissism in music structures. Well, you said it yourself. So, are we now going into the field of social criticism? um, uh,
Well, I mean, narcissism is something that has interested me for a very long time.
mhm,
Um, because it's a trait. Actually, maybe because, so from, I mean, the first conductor that I ever assisted was Oliver Nasson, who is a British, or was a British composer and conductor. And then after that, I spent a lot of time in rehearsals of many different conductors and many different situations, sometimes assisting, sometimes just watching,
mhm,
sometimes just meeting because someone would introduce us to say, this is to talk about scores, to talk about music, the
mhm,
industry. And when you meet so many conductors at such a young age as well,
mhm,
it becomes really because I think with conductors we quite often have this um, idea of what they are and what it is to conduct, what it is, because we see it in we see them in the context of a very particular power structure.
mhm.
Um, and meeting so many conductors made me realize that we really, when I reflected on it, that we really live in a world that rewards narcissism in a way that's both positive and negative. And so narcissism has, I guess, that was the beginning of it. And then the more I read about it, the more that I met different people, lived a bit longer, I realized that it's really very fascinating. Uh, I mean, now people still ask the question, can what do we do with artists who create great art but have horrible personalities or political views that we don't agree with?
Yeah, that's also the question
Especially,
that Pushkin, for example.
especially ones that really, as a society, we have decided we do not accept that anymore. Um, yeah, what do we do that? What do we do with that?
But people would respond to you that you can't put everybody on in the position of power because they wouldn't produce the same results. For example, the agent of a famous conductor would tell you, but a rank and file musician just couldn't do the same things as my client does. That's why I put him into position of power, because then the world receives all the cultural results that he produces, or she, through the power that she or he gets. And but if the hierarchy didn't exist, then the good objects, the good results, good concerts, good operas just wouldn't be produced, because everybody would be so kind, so sensitive, so considerate, but no results would be in place.
Well, that's one point of view. Um, I think I think there are I think there are many. We live one version of the world. We live one existence,
Mm-hmm.
and but it's one of infinite number of possibilities that could have happened. And as wonderful as this world is, I think for the vast majority of society globally, of people, this system does not work. And so I'm very interested in asking, what other versions of this world could there have been, and what other versions of society could exist in the future.
Do you try to create them in your operas, like sort of the model worlds of an ideal situation that you are
I
envisioning?
don't have a idea of what the world should be, or um, what we or what utopia looks like. Um, but I'm interested in finding other possibilities. But it's for me, it's more about the question than it is to find the answer.
But like maybe now I'm asking even a personal question, but what if nobody approves of of your vision? How do you still was is that I tried to do the activities, like even the interviewing and and anthropological research, that were more in demand than my own creative writing, because I began to doubt whether it is needed by anyone, and I didn't want to live my life just writing something, as we say in Russian, into your own writing table. So
Yeah.
my question is, how do you maintain the courage and the knowledge that your own vision is necessary and valid and is worth of existing?
Well, I'm not really someone who believes A, that I have a vision, or B, I that my voice should be heard. It's more important that my voice is heard than another person's voice. Um, but I think that's also why it's important to be true to, if you're going to put an image of yourself out into the world, it's really vital that you put a image that is as true to who you think you are as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, for instance, in my case, when I get a commission, I know that what that person wants from me is close to who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because I'm the student of someone or from some school, or it's but I know that when they're commissioning me, they're really commissioning me.
So
And
sort
that
of,
means that in a way is someone saying, we would like to build a relationship with you. We would like to share a space with you and to create something together. Um, and that invitation is really, I think, is one that feels meaningful.
mm-hmm.
And it's that sort of relationship that I live for, because
So
that
yeah.
because that allows me to put in public the process that I do anyway, which is
So it,
compose.
so in a way, it occurred to me you're kind of not catching the small fish, but you're waiting for the big fish for your own fish, in the river
Well, I
of
don't know if it's
fishes.
about I don't know if it's about small and big. But I have to say that I say no to more work than I accept.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it makes no sense financially or career-wise. But I know that if someone asks me to write um, chamber music, for instance, I don't write any chamber music.
Mm-hmm.
If someone asks me to write a piece for flute, harp, and I don't know, didgeridoo, um, I would have to say no because it's not, it doesn't, I don't, I've had no reason within me to put that combination of sounds together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no interest in me to compose, um, which means I say no to work. But I think in the long run, if you're going to survive emotionally, um, it's the only way that I found works for me.
Wouldn't I now say something controversial in suggesting that then people who are not famous have remained there, have kept their integrity, and we can suspect that people who are too famous are sellouts, or maybe we're just saying it with some kind of inner grudge because we are not yet there, you know?
No, I think that's too black and white.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people who so for instance, now I'm working with my mentor is a someone called Heiner Goebbels,
Mm-hmm.
and he really he's only ever created work that he really believed in. And I think maybe it's that's the other thing about mentorship is that aside from all the technical things that you learn, one thing that really helps is that someone you really believe in says that they think that they believe in you too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's possibly the most important thing I ever got from many of my mentors or composers that I met, was that they said, yeah, um, I think that you have something really interesting to say.
And you can distinguish whether they are being honest or whether they're just being polite and supportive.
Mm, well, with most people I've met, I don't feel they've never had incentive to be polite. Or for instance, if you have a relationship with someone in an email, and you send them a score and you ask them, I would really appreciate your help with this, they can always say no.
Mm-hmm.
So if they say yes, then um, it's they've said yes because they want to, not because they felt obliged to in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but of course, I think, there are situations with mentors and teachers where mentors or the person who is in a position of power, say, um, has needed something back. They wanted to make it public, or they wanted to, um, I don't know, they needed something back. And I think in those that would that the student didn't want to give or was not in a position to give. And I think that's when a kind of teacher student relationship can become very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Then I guess let's imagine, like I was really sort of even shocked slightly when you said that there would be no orchestras and no rehearsals once we get out of current situation. Do you really believe in it?
Oh, well, yeah, because I mean, I don't, it's so difficult to imagine when they will allow, if you imagine a concert hall it's a place that thousands of people can gather. So at what point is it going to be okay for that?
Well, my friend yesterday suggested that we might have a bio passports. Like for example, you have checked and you have, for example, antivirus, you know, things. For example, after being ill, and then you are checked every 3 months, and then only you are allowed into a big concert hall. Or
Wow.
maybe they will leave it at risk and just kind of it will be a let go strategy. Like they would know that there is some risk, but as the curve has been flattened, the risk is always not too high, and the hospitals will be ready for new patients all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Um, I mean, I can say it's really, for me, it's really hard not to be around live music. I mean, just the
Mm-hmm.
physical sensation of sound is something I love so much. So it's really difficult not to um, be close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it really terrifies me to think about when it will be possible.
Do you know, have you had this period of anxiety when you actually had time for creative work but couldn't do it? Or did your flow of composition just continue smoothly as it was before? Did you, because I myself maybe still, I'm still living through almost a month of anxiety when in Britain suddenly, it
Mm.
went from my last concert, my last rehearsal, and then it went downside, when every time I even didn't know if I'll be able to return to Russia. So I kind of experienced a bit of a escape movie situation within a week and kind of got scared. So I wondered whether you are under some anxiety pressure at the moment.
Um, I don't know. I think maybe I'm very lucky in that sense. Um, I'm very comfortable where I am.
Mm-hmm.
I have, I have. Well, I decided to come back to my parents' house actually because
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of books here and I have piano here, so I could work. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also a place where um, it's very quiet. Um, and I think for me, being around books is probably the most important
Mm-hmm.
thing if I'm going to be alone. For me, the being periods of isolation or periods of being indoors is not so new, but it is very different. It's a different mental leap when it's a period where you've chosen compared to a period which you feel has been imposed upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I haven't felt anxiety. I felt very, very sad um, for people who are dying, people who are suffering. Um, that's probably been the most difficult aspect of this time is knowing that there are so many people who are really suffering, and in a way,
Do
quite unnecessarily so.
Well, yes, I kind of, like, and I think now too many theories are put together to sort of for us to rationalize it. Like, there has been like the godly punishment or the theory of golden milliard that it was put in together by some people who just wanted to have less people on planet. So I think we are trying to rationalize it because it's not in human nature to leave things without a scenario. So I think we will now be witnessing too many scenarios, and afterwards, of course, that will try to cope, that will help us to cope mentally with it. It would be anything
Mm.
like I even saw something that maybe Russia was the the origin of the virus. So it will be, I think, serving too many purposes. Like political, historical, psychological, religious. Somehow it will feature in every possible rationalization of the
Mm.
past, the present, and the future. And I wonder whether you are feeling that you are choosing a scenario or you are trying to keep them be neutral.
Well, for me, the best use of this time is really just to stop
Mm-hmm.
making, if you're feeling anxious, to stop making, stop listening to other people, and really to find yourself again and take distance. I think distance is something that's very important because I mean traditionally I guess our distance is with time. With hindsight, we're able to see things in a clearer way or in a more objective way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in a situation, you don't have that privilege. Um, so somehow you need to find a distance that allows you to see things in a more objective and just in a way that's less emotion driven. That because quite often anxiety from my experience, anxiety usually comes from feeling like you have no control of your current
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, for instance, panic or feeling like you're in this movie, it's when you don't have control over your own choices and you're being pushed around by forces that are outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what quite often drives fear.
In a way, I was also thinking, because I know we spoke about narcissism before, it actually drives the narcissism out of you if you think about it. Because I thought to myself, like, am I really so important? You know, if I die or not, why am I so worried about it? Maybe I just should be less worried about it. I just thought about the generations, maybe a small legacy, whether I left it or not. But in general, I would be just a representative of a particular generation of Russians, and I'm sure there would be many others. So in a way, it helped me to reduce the fears, because we are maybe individually, now we understand that we are not that important, each of us. Maybe now we see that as humanity we are more important.
Yeah, I mean, narcissism is interesting because it works both ways. It's positive and negative. And it produces a lot, but it also destroys a lot simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think I think that's maybe why I really love Messiaen's music so much. I mean, he was very connected to Christian mythology, the Christian Church, Catholicism. But because of that, his music is always looking to the space beyond humanity. It's always it's music that, from what I hear, it tells us that outside of human concerns and our everyday sort of anxiety, that actually we are so small um, in the universe that we exist in, and there really are powers that we will never have control over,
Mm-hmm.
and there are things that exist that we will never ever understand. Um, but it's so relaxing as well, that we don't have to control everything, that we don't have to fix everything, or everything to take responsibility for everything, that actually we are so small in terms of the universe, in terms of time, and that we don't have to put such great importance in our own existence.
Actually, that reminded me. I read in an interview of Salonin that Beethoven's Seven was played to the Bushmen, and they said that they were feeling like they were birds. So it was
Mm-hmm.
the only music that made them feel like birds.
Mm-hmm.
And to this goes maybe the question to you, apart from Messiaen, or what music are you now listening to maybe help you develop this emotion that you are not responsible, that there are some powers that are beyond you?
What music?
Yeah.
um I listen to a lot of music, but generally I have to say, the things that really inspire my own work are not music. It's usually text or poem, or just life experiences, which is very hard now because I'm not meeting anyone or
Mm-hmm.
feeling people in a kind of um, physical way, and that's such an important part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right now, I don't know. I think, well, Messiaen was he was very smart. I mean, but for him, the birds are singing, right? It's always bird song. Um, but somehow I do have a bit of trouble with that because because birds don't really sing for me. Actually, they're just calling, they're speaking. It's not a song. Um, and if you imagine a bird um, who's shouting out but never gets a response, is it more that they're singing or are they crying? I'm not sure. When I listen to birds, I'm not sure if I hear songs.
So are you saying that apart from music and books, you're doing birds watching? Well,
Yeah,
I'm joking. But yeah.
yeah, I listen to the birds every day,
Hmm.
first thing in the morning, and also now actually it's about I think 7 o'clock. You can hear them outside, especially in
Oh.
spring because they're really very frisky here in London. They're having a really nice time right now.
Well, I'm warning you that we might be cut off any moment because it's
Okay.
within an hour. But what are your now? What are your daily routines? Do you go for this allowed legal walk? And you said that you are part of the volunteering program too in London.
Yes. Well, the other thing, I mean, I'm composing every day now. I
Hmm.
found a kind of good routine. But the other thing that I'm part of this organization called uh, the New Economics Foundation in London.
Hmm.
And there's a meeting every Thursday evening online,
Hmm.
just discussing ideas about what the future of the economy can look like. Because that's something that really interests me. Um, and between that and trying to wake up at the same time every morning, um, composing, but not necessarily really writing very much,
Hmm.
I'm pretty busy. It feels busy.
Are you preparing this opera that is now listed that you will be conducting also in 2021?
Opera. I'm preparing a new ballet or dance
Mm-hmm.
piece. Um, and then after that is a is my first work as composer and director.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm creating a work uh, in which I'm constructing the visuals and the sound and the entire piece as one structure.
So you would be what they now call a deviser, yeah, of
Oh yeah, or narcissist.
again. So I kind of think that you will become a specialist in narcissism music. So when my book will have this chapter, I will continually interview you on the subject, and you will provide me new information that you have acquired.
Okay.
But I remember your opera was also. You remember we talked about an opera which also involved a narcissist, right? You said as a
Uh,
central character, no?
yes, I was doing when we first met. I was doing research for a piece. Yeah, that I workshopped a bit in Avignon a couple of years ago in 2018.
Hmm.
Um, and that's sort of wow, that's a long time ago. Yeah, that's after these.
Did you leave this project aside, or is it
No,
ready?
no, that will be after um the next two things that I'm doing.
Mm, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
you need a bit of time.
well, okay, maybe it's time to finish. Firstly, I hope we'll meet again in person. Secondly, I hope, because for me it was also part of my life, we both of you could still attend the rehearsals. Now I'm not sure about it. And
Yeah.
third, that at least we could attend the live concerts if when they happen. I kind of plan for autumn,
Autumn? Okay.
next season, yeah.
Yeah. I mean like my concerts that were cancelled in March were have been postponed
Yeah, I was
to
supposed to be there.
summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I'm not sure. I don't really know if in my heart I really believe they will happen. But
Mm.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, greetings to everybody from St. Petersburg and from London. I'm very glad to be connecting people in this way. And although we can't be really together, but I hope it will be at least an ersatz connection for everyone who is watching. And I will put it, if you allow me, I have now found a way to put it online for longer than 24 hours.
Oh,
Are you okay with it?
yeah, sure. Maybe cut it a bit. I'm not sure it's all
Well,
that
I
interesting.
can't because it's just kind of records the screen, and then
Yeah.
I can't do the montage. I can just
Oh,
put it on YouTube, and that's all.
yeah. Well, I guess you never know.
Well, thank you so much, and let's keep in touch
Yeah.
and tune in to my other interviews.
I
That's the ed part. Tune in on Wednesday. I will be interviewing the designer from the Finnish National Opera, and on Thursday And on Thursday, Alexis Barrière, the French-Finnish
Oh yeah,
director, and on Friday, the actor from Germany, and on Saturday, the violinist from the Mariinsky and Valencia.
you're busy.
Yes, so yes, that was the ed part of our QE program. Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you so much.